Well, good evening, everybody. It is great to be here with you all tonight. If you don't know me, if I haven't had the privilege of meeting you yet, my name is Drew. I am the associate high school pastor here, and I love hanging with you guys. I love what I get to do, and I have a question for you. Who's ready for summer? Are you ready? We're close. It's a magic time of year, almost, right? It's a time of year where we've got a ton of transitions, right? You kind of transition from school mode into summer mode, or maybe it's summer practice mode, or for our team, a lot of the high school ministry leaders are actually down in Orange County right now, and we're going after the service tonight to go be with some of our new freshmen, right? It's the 8th graders. They're transitioning to become freshmen in a couple weeks, and so we're gonna kind of have a trip celebrating that with them. We're seniors. Next Sunday is Senior Sunday. That's the fight, right? And, well, it's a mixed bag for us too. We're heartbroken because we love you and we're gonna miss you, seniors. But we're excited for you, right? It's kind of an appropriate time. You're ready for the next step, and we're excited to see you move to that. But it's a time of transitions, and it always gets me kind of reflective. And so I've been thinking about kind of what was my experience, right, when I transitioned from being in high school to being in college. And I was thinking and remembering my first day of college, right? My first day, moving down to school. I went to LMU, go Lions. That's down in Los Angeles. So it wasn't yeah, we can clap. I loved it. So it wasn't that far, right? It was I'm moving so far away to Los Angeles, California, right? But I remember my first day. So I was very lucky, I should say, to my first year on campus at school. I got an on-campus apartment, right? So I didn't have to do dorms. It was a room with me and 3 other roommates. We had 2 bedrooms, so 2 guys per room. We had our own bathroom. We had the living room and the kitchen. It was a sweet setup. And so I remember first day of school, I pack up the car with my mom and my dad, and they drive me down to college, right? And so we show up. I'm kind of the early bird, so I'm kind of unpacking, and we hang. We go to lunch and the whole thing. We're having a nice day, as parents love to do. And so I go in random. I don't know who my roommates are going to be, so we kind of chat a little bit online, and it's kind of I'm going to meet the people I'm going to live with for the first time today. And so the first guy came and put down a box and left. I was hi, his name was Ben. He walks in hey, puts the box down and leaves. I didn't see him again for the rest of the day. I was hey, okay, so I guess someone else will be my friend, right? And then the next guy came and he's I got everybody Mrs. Fields cookies. I was well, you're the best roommate ever, right? It was a big cookie, and put him down. I was this is great. It's like a Disney movie. And then the final roommate, the one who I shared a room with, the guy named Tommy, shows up, and he shows up with his parents, and so it's you know how parents are when they get with other parents, oh, my kid, blah, 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 right? The whole parent thing, you're oh, wow. And so I'm meeting Tommy, and we're kind of chatting, and seems a really nice guy, really sweet, loves his parents, he's putting out his Harry Potter books on his bookshelf. I'm nice, we're gonna get along okay, right? And so my parents are kind of hanging or whatever, and then they leave, and I say goodbye, and they go off to do their thing, and his parents hang a little longer, and then they do the goodbyes, and it's that classic moment from the movie when the kid goes to college where the dad's son, you're a man now, right? One of those moments. And the mom's I'm gonna miss you so much. And they have that thing, and he's Mommy, it's okay. I love you too. The whole thing. I was oh, a kid loves his family. And so the mom's I'm gonna miss you more. And he's no, I'm gonna miss you more, Mommy. And then they're back towards the door, and then the door closes. And I'm well, that went really well. And he's let's get wasted, right? Pulls out. I was whoa. Pulled out the biggest box filled with alcohol that I have ever seen, right? And I wasn't I wasn't what is this liquid in these bottles? That happens in college. I knew that was a thing that happened in college, but it was a magic trick. I was how did you get that in without your parents seeing it? What kind of sorcery is this? And so he goes from sweet guy, love you, Mommy, to let's get wasted. And I was oh my gosh, college snuck up on me really fast. Oh boy. But I remember it being kind of this, it's funny to look back on and to laugh at, but for me, I remember it kind of being this pivotal moment for me, right? Where I suddenly realized, okay, I knew, it wasn't the first time that I'd been presented with, do you want to party with it? That wasn't a new thing, but it was the first time that I really realized over the next few years, I'm gonna have to make some decisions about who I want to be, right? About like who I say God is in my life, how I relate to him, like what his plan is for my life versus what like every other option is. And like, there's literally no one around here who knows me, right? Like no one who has the context of my history, no one who's gonna like hold me accountable, no one who's gonna kind of like pursue me if I'm kind of getting off tracks. It was this moment where I was like, wow, I really have an opportunity to either like lean into my faith, to like hold on to my faith, right? Or to kind of take it and kind of like minimize it or push it away altogether and just become a different person. Like no one would stop me, no one would call me on it. Like it was an opportunity where I was like, wow, this is a pivotal moment where this road can go two directions. And for us, I think we all have kind of moments like that in our life. Right? And let me say this. I don't presume to know each one of your stories, right? Like you know your story, you're living it. And there are so many complexities, eccentricities to your story. I don't presume to know, but I would wager to guess that people in the room tonight kind of run the spectrum of just faith stories, right? Like maybe for you, your faith is stronger than it's ever been. Right now, like it's robust and it's strong and it's sturdy and you're just like ready to take on whatever, whether you're a senior who's graduating or not. Like your faith is in a strong place. Or maybe you're in the room tonight and you feel like your faith is hanging on by a thread, right? Or maybe it's just like gone. Maybe you've like already walked away and like nobody knows, right? Like maybe you're here tonight because like just to like keep up pretenses or because your friends are here or because like your parents want you to be here. Like I don't presume to know the spectrum of stories that are in this room. But I do want to say this. I've been praying for each one of you leading up to this week, and I do believe that God has something to say to each one of us through his word tonight. So that's what we're gonna do, that's what we're gonna look at. But first, I mean, we're in this series, we're finishing up, it's been a 3-week series on this concept. It's kind of a phrase from a chunk of scripture that says, kind of when we look back on our lives, right? Like whether it's like right now looking back or like ultimately at the end of our life, our hope is that we'll be able to say this phrase from scripture: I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept my faith. Right? I fought the good fight, right? Like I like took my life and I fought for things that mattered, right? I didn't pick stupid fights. I didn't make my like life about agendas that didn't really matter. They were inconsequential. I fought the good fight, right? Like I finished the race. I stayed the course. I was true to who I am. Like I stayed on the path. Like I finished the race. I did what I set out to do. And tonight we're going to talk about keeping our faith. Like how do we keep our faith? Why do we keep our faith? Right? And so here's what I say. There's probably a ton of stories in this room of different places. Like your faith might be stronger than ever. Your faith might be just anemic and ready to die, or maybe it's already gone, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. But I do believe that God has something to say to each of us. So here's the first thing. First, I want to just kind of look at a couple reasons why people might walk away from their faith, like kind of the big reasons why people do it. Now, again, there are complexities to everybody's story, but these are kind of some of the big reasons. You might give up your faith too. And so here it is on the screen. You might give up your faith to get the job, right? Like maybe you're kind of like gunning for a role or a position in some sort of organization, and like you have a faith, and then somehow something about this organization is in conflict with that, right? Like I have a buddy, he's an actor, he's very talented, booked a lead on a TV show. They found out he was a Christian and they fired him and hired someone else. Like this is real, this is a real thing, right? Like sometimes like the opportunity is on the line, right? Like your faith comes into conflict, right? What do we do when our faith comes into conflict? That's the question. Do we keep it or do we take it, minimize it, and throw it behind us, right? So to get the job. What else? To join the club, right? To be part of a group of people, to belong, right? To fit in, to have membership in this organization or this community, right? We have to decide. Sometimes it comes into conflict with that. Maybe it's not seen as the most attractive quality to be a person of faith, right? And so you have to decide, like, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is how it impacts my life. Or I'm gonna take my faith and I'm gonna minimize it. I'm gonna put it over here, or maybe I'm just gonna throw it away altogether, right? What else? To get the guy or the girl. Yeah, right? Like, I'd wager some of you have maybe felt this conflict, right? Like you're a person of faith, and there's like that guy or that girl, and you're like, oh, she's so like, or like, oh, he's such a, like, right? But they're not into faith. They're like, that. So like, tell me about this faith thing that you're a part of, right? Like, is that like, are you serious about that? Or like, do I have to go to church with you, right? Like, does that matter? Right? And you have an opportunity, right? To say, this is who I am, this is what I believe, this is how I live my life, or to take that faith and minimize it or to throw it away altogether. People do it every day. I've seen it happen, right? What else? To be cool, right? It sounds so dumb when you say it out loud, but we're like, so many of us are motivated by that, right? Like, oh, I just want people to think I'm cool. I want to fit in. And there are times in your life, right, when your faith, what you believe, what it has to do with your life and how you live it comes into conflict with what people say is cool, right? With what will get you brownie points, what will make people admire you or desire you or like you, right? It comes into conflict and you have a choice. Am I going to keep my faith or am I going to take it and minimize it or throw it away altogether, right? What else? To have fun, right? Like that's a big one. That's like college in a nutshell, right? Is like there, you'll have tons of social opportunities, right? And you kind of are faced with a decision. Am I gonna keep my faith? Am I gonna take it and make it important in my life? Or am I gonna minimize it or just get rid of it altogether? Right, what else? To save face. Right? Like maybe people won't think very highly of you. Or maybe like people know things about you and you don't want that to come into like relationship with like, aren't you Chris? So you just take that and you just throw it away. Right? Like, no, I'm not. That's the thing I used to be. I'm not that anymore. Right? What else? Stay out of trouble. That's a real one. Like real talk. There are places in the world and situations where it will put you in danger, right? To be a person of faith. Right? And I pray none of us have to make that decision, but there are moments where people will have to decide, is this who I am? Is this what I believe? Is this how I live my life? Or am I going to take it, minimize it, and throw it away? Right? We have a ton of reasons why we walk away from our faith, why our faith can hang in the balance, and we're not sure which way the scales are going to tip. But I really do genuinely believe that God has something to say to us about those decisions in the scriptures tonight. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump in on a story. We're going OG to the OT, right? We're going Old Testament to a book. If you've grown up, if you've grown up around the church, if you went to Sunday school or you did VBS or like you've like watched Veggie Tales, right? Yeah, Veggie Tales. That's always a crowd pleaser, right? So if you watch Veggie Tales, you've probably heard a story or some stories from the book of Daniel, right? The book of Daniel. And in that book, there are three dudes with the weirdest name you ever have heard. And that would be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah, you guys got it. You guys got it. So here's the thing, to catch you up, if you need a refresher course or if this is all fresh information to you, which is like so fun, I'm excited to tell it to you if you haven't heard it before. Let me give you some context about what's going on in this story before we jump in to see what it has to say tonight. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're Israelites. They are Jewish men. They are kind of, they're like smart, they're young, they're kind of strong, athletic, like soldier types, like hero types. They're Jewish men, and at this point in history, Babylon is kind of in charge of Israel, right? Like they've taken control. They're on this conquest to expand out into the world and to kind of like extend their reach and be in charge. They're making the reach for it. They're making the play, right? And so they are over Israel right now. And so kind of the young, kind of like eligible men, like the kind of hero types, get conscripted into the king's army, his service, right? And so they send him to their schools to learn their philosophies and their religions. They put them through kind of their boot camp to learn their way of doing things. They give them new names. They're like, your old name is not valid anymore. You're not that person anymore. We'll tell you who you are now. Enter Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So it's these three guys. They're strangers in a strange land, right? Like suddenly they don't fit. I don't know, have you ever felt like you didn't fit? Like, have you ever been in a new setting where you look around, you're like, I don't know anybody. I don't know kind of like the like social norms, the customs, like I don't fit. Or maybe that's just like, you feel that way and you've lived in the same place your whole life, right? Like to feel like a stranger in a strange land, like I don't fit, I don't belong. I feel like a mismatch. That's these guys, right? And so they're kind of thrown into this new situation and they're kind of trying to like assimilate them into their culture. The king, a guy named Nebuchadnezzar, is trying to kind of like take them and make them like 2.0, right? To make them like Babylonians, right? And they have to make choices daily of, are we going to stick with our faith in the God that we know, that we've known since we were young, or are we going to take it and minimize it and throw it away and just kind of get on board with what people are telling us to do now, with what's cool, with what's socially acceptable, with what's the norm or what will advance us, right? They have to make some decisions. And so kind of one of the first big times that it comes into conflict, right? It's a dietary thing, right? Have you ever gone to lunch or dinner with a vegan? Right? We're like, people, I have learned, people love to hate on the vegans, right? Like, if you're out to a meal with a vegan and everyone's like, give me a steak, or like, I'll have chicken with extra chicken, please. And then the vegan's like, do you have veggie burgers? People are like, oh, no. And then the waiter leans in and they're like, how dare you, right? And like slap them across the face. Like, people love to hate on the vegans, right? They basically have to be the vegans in the situation. In fact, they straight up do have to be the vegans in the situation. You got Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're conscripted into the king's army, and the king's like, okay, well, everyone eats the same meal, right? Like hot lunch, who wants it? Move down the conveyor belt. Like everyone eats the same meal, and it's meat, and it's dairy, and all the stuff that they culturally can't eat, right? At this point in history, the Israelites have very specific guidelines for the kind of food that is acceptable to eat and the kind that is not, right? And so they're kind of faced with this dilemma, right? This is the food they're giving us. This is kind of like our opportunity to decide, like, is this really a big deal? Should we like wait and just like eat the food and like fight a bigger battle down the way? Or like, what do we do? They have this opportunity to decide what to do. Do we keep our faith or do we minimize it, throw it away and do something else? And they decide to fight for it. Right? And so they talk to the kind of like the next guy up above them, right? And they're like, hey, so all of this food, we're not going to eat that. And the guy's like, well, you got to eat something because I'm going to get fired if you guys drop dead from malnourishment. And they're like, well, just give us like the vegetables. Right? And the guy's like, are you kidding me? And they're like, let's just try it. Let's do like a trial run. We'll do like a couple days and just like see how it's going. Like give it a trial run. And the guy's like, okay, like don't tell anybody that I'm doing this for you, right? So he gives them like the veggies. And a couple days later, he comes back to check base and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are like doing better. They're higher performing. They're like smarter. They're like jumping over the obstacles or whatever it is that they do. Like they're stronger than the guys on the king's diet. So the guy, they're kind of like commanding guy goes to his boss, who goes to his boss, and basically is like, hey, we tried this thing and they're doing much better. And so they put everybody on, like, could you imagine if it was like, everyone's vegan now? Like everyone would be like, no, like they're making no friends, right? So someone's like, it's not that bad. Real talk, I was vegan for a few months, so I commiserate. I'm not anymore. I was for a little bit. But, so they're kind of like, everyone's vegan in the army now. Like, it's a weird army, but that's what was going on. It worked for the time. And so these guys kind of get recognition, like, hey, you're kind of mavericks, right? Like you stood up for what you believe in and like benefits. And so everyone's doing that now. And so we'll give you like a little more authority, right? They're kind of raised to a higher level. They're kind of like getting a little like nicer accommodations. People are respecting them a little bit more. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they like defended their faith. And now they've kind of had their first victory. And that's where we're going to enter this story tonight and see what happens now. So here's what it tells us in Daniel chapter 3. It says this: King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold. In other words, he made a statue out of solid gold. Because when you're a king, what else are you going to do with all your gold than make it like a statue of something, right? It says it was 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, which is an ancient measurement to tell you that was a big statue. It was a big statue, you guys, and it was all gold. It says it was 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and he set it up on the plains of Dura in the province of Babylon. So basically put it out in public where everyone could see it. It says Nebuchadnezzar, summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officers to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. In other words, he gets kind of like all his lay leaders, all like the next level down leaders. And he's like, guys, party, I got to tell you about my new thing I made, right? So he's like unveiling the statue, like, whoa, check it out. And they're like, wow, that's a lot of gold, right? So he brings them all. He summons them all. Here's what happens. So he summons them. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provincial officials assembled for the dedication. So they all show, he invites them, he summons them, they all come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it, right? Like they're in awe of it. They're like, wow, that's so shiny. Oh my goodness. Right, so it says this. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, right? The herald is like their like media. It's like their Twitter, only he just talked out loud with his voice. Right, so it says, then the herald loudly proclaimed, nations and people of every language, this is what you are commanded to do, right? He's like shouting out to everybody. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, all kinds of music, right? Like, as soon as you hear any sound, basically, you must fall down to the ground and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And they're like, all right, we're tracking with this like it's a pretty thing. Like, anytime we hear anything with our ears, then we fall to the ground and worship the statue. Great, cool. He goes, awesome, you got that? Now, whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into the blazing furnace. Everyone's like, what? Like, 0 to 100 real fast. Right? So he's like, look at my beautiful statue, worship it whenever you hear a thing or die. Right? Like, that's kind of like his new decree. So everyone's like, oh, what? So therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, or basically all kinds of music, all the nations and all the people of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Now, here's what you need to know. Remember, Babylon is expanding their reach, and they're taking over people from every nation, right? Different faith backgrounds. All of them, all of the people, whatever background they come from, are hearing this decree, taking their faith and throwing it out. Right? They're saying, I've got too much in the game. I don't want to, I don't want to die, right? So, whatever that faith was, not that important about it. It didn't even mean it, right? It was my parents' thing. It wasn't a big deal, right? Like, they took their faith and they threw it out, right? And that does not exclude Jewish people. There were Jewish people, too, in this story who did the same, right? This story is about 3 people, not all people. You look around and the crowd is going for it, right? They're like, great, we can get on board. Let's do that. We don't want to die. Fire sounds bad, too hot, not into it, right? So they take their faith and they throw it out. Here's what it says. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced these Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, may the king live forever. Smart way to start with the king, butter him up, right? May the king live forever. Your majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, it's like Dr. Seuss wrote this book of the Bible. The horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, all kinds of music, basically, should fall down and worship the image of gold, right? And he's like, yeah. And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown in the blazing furnace. Yeah, right? Just catching up to speed, just want to reiterate. But, Nebuchadnezzar, there are some Jews who you've set over affairs in the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship that image of gold you have set up, right? So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They didn't charge, they weren't like, this is ridiculous, charge the castle, kill the king, we will not, they were just living their lives, right? The king was like, you gotta do this or you die. And they're like, all right, we're just gonna keep worshiping God, not a big deal, right? So they just keep doing them, right? They're just worshiping God, they hear music, everyone else is like, oh, and they're like, I like this one, right? And just keep living their lives, right? Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? So these 3 men, they're brought to the king. And Nebuchadnezzar says to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Is that true? And they're like, yeah, that's true. We don't. He goes, okay. Well, now, when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, all the musics, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, that'd be very good. We should do this. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Now, here's something that's important to recognize. In this story with Nebuchadnezzar and in all sorts of opportunities, situations, circumstances, when your faith comes into conflict with some sort of organization, social system, person in power, here's what you need to know. For Nebuchadnezzar, and I would wager in those other circumstances, this is a power thing, right? This is about Nebuchadnezzar wanting them to be under his power, right? Nebuchadnezzar's power is threatened because they won't fall in line, right? Their allegiance is to God. Nebuchadnezzar's saying, well, that's not good with me. So you can obey me and be under my power, let me rule you, or I can kill you. Those are your options. Little extreme, but that's what happens when you're crazy for power, right? So then he says, then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand, right? Like bold claim. He's like, there is no God that can stop me from killing you. That's his claim. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Bold, right? In other words, they're saying, Nebuchadnezzar, this literally has nothing to do with you. Like this, you don't even matter in this equation. You're inconsequential to this equation because this is about us and God, right? Like this is who we say God is, right? This is who we say God is, what we believe about him and how we let that shape our life. You are like scenery in this conversation, right? This is not of consequence to you. Like, why are you even asking us about this? You are not that important in this equation. Right? They say, we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Then they say, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. We know who our God is. We know what he promises. We know what we've seen, what we've experienced. We know that he's able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from it. He'll deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Bold. Well, like go to the king who clearly has a temper problem, right? And they're just like bold about it. They're like, no. First of all, this has nothing to do with you. This is between us and God. You can try to kill us, but we know who our God is, right? Like he can save us from that fire, and we believe that he will. But even if he doesn't, no deal. We would rather go to the fire than take what is precious to us and throw it away. So no deal. I wonder if Nebuchadnezzar will respond in a cool, level-headed way. No. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed, right? Like originally it was kind of like, ooh, these guys are mavericks, right? Like charting their own course. Like they did the thing with the veggies and that panned out. So like I could mold these guys. They could be leaders, right? Like that'd be a fun little project. And then like they're my boys and they do what I say, right? He kind of has that soft spot in his heart for them. That's gone. That is gone. It says his attitude towards them changed. Right? So it says he orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. A usual furnace would have done the trick, but this guy is like crazy. Like, have you ever been like so mad that you're just like crazy? Like, I don't know, like if like someone like said something, or even something as dumb as like you're like stub your toe and you're like, like you don't understand my pain. Like I will kill all of you, right? Like you just get like crazy, right? Nebuchadnezzar's there. He's like, take that furnace that would kill anybody and make it 7 times more killy, right? He's like drunk on power. He orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded some of the strongest men in his army, like any soldiers could do this job. He goes, I want the strongest ones, right? Strongest men in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them in to the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. Now here's the deal, is like up to this moment, right? They like it wasn't too late. They like literally they could be like being tied up. They could be like being like hoisted up the steps or whatever. Like they'd be like, we changed our minds. We'll worship. Like it was not too late, right? But up to this point in their story, we have seen, right, that they have fought the good fight, right? Like they chose their battles wisely. They fought for things that mattered. They didn't get caught up in stupid things. They didn't like put all their coins in one basket of an agenda that didn't matter. They fought the good fight, right? They fought for what mattered. They finished the race, right? Like they did what they set out to do. They continued on that road. They didn't turn back. They didn't veer to the right or to the left. Like they finished the race, and now we get to see them keep their faith, right? And so here's what happens. It says, so these men wearing their robes and trousers and turbans and other clothes were bound, tied tight with ropes, bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, right? Again, like rage drunk. He's like, now and make it hot, right? It was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. right? Who took them up, like the strongest soldiers, the best soldiers. He's so mad that he sends them and they wind up dying because he's made an irrational decision to make the furnace 7 times hotter than normal, right? Loses some of his best men. So it kills the soldiers that were taking them up, and it says these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the furnace. Now I want to pause for just a second from this story to talk about faith. Because up to this point tonight, we haven't really defined what faith is, right? Like we've been talking about it, like maybe you have a concept of what you think it is, but here's what I want to do. I want to jump real quick to a book of the Bible in the New Testament called Hebrews in chapter 11 and just give you one verse, and here's what it says. It says this, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Right? We've seen this in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance in what we do not see. So for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their faith is that they are confident, right? They're confident in what they hope for. What they hope for is that their God is able and will deliver them from this fire, right? They are confident of it. They said it to the king, like bold-faced, all out. They said it. Our God can, and we think he will deliver us from this. They're confident of it. And it's assurance about what they do not see. They have assurance. Like they're like, you know what? I'm confident and I'm at peace with this because I know who my God is, right? So faith, in other words, is about belief and trust, right? It's about where belief and trust intersect, right? Because you can have belief, right? You can have belief, you can intellectually think something, but not have trust. That's not faith, right? Like trust is, okay, I believe this and I will live my life according to it. I will step off that ledge and believe, right? I'll put my trust in it. It's the intersection of belief and trust, right? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take their belief and they take their trust and they intersect at God and they say, go ahead, throw us in the furnace, right? That is faith. So let's see what happens in this story. So they're tied up. They're saying, we know our God. We know what he can do. He can deliver us from this fire. We think he will deliver us from this fire. If he doesn't, that's up to him. We still trust him, right? That doesn't mean he's not good. That doesn't mean he's not right. We trust him, right? So tie us up, throw us in. So they go into the fire. It says this, then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw in the fire? Like we're 1, 2, 3, like check like the execution schedule. Like 1, 2, 3, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. It wasn't like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and like Bobo, right? Like there was 3, right? Like we threw 3 guys in the fire. Yes, 3. Did any of those soldiers that we wasted go in the fire? No, they all died before they got in the fire. The 3 fell in. Okay, so 3, we're in agreement, right? 3 guys went in the fire. Yes, sir. In fact, they replied, certainly, your majesty, it is certain. We have no doubt. There are 3 men in that fire. He says, look, I see 4 men. 4. I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th one looks like a son of the gods, right? So Nebuchadnezzar, they go in the fire. He sees them suddenly walking around in the fire, and there's another dude in there who looks kind of magic. Like, what's going on? Who's that guy, right? Like, this is new. This has never happened with the whole furnace execution gig, right? Like, is this supposed to go like this? Is that like a new furnace or something? Like, what's going on, right? So he's like, I see 4 guys in that fire. What's going on, fellas? Right, so Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted. You can imagine the flames were pretty loud, 7 times louder than normal. Shouts, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the clearly most high God, come out, come here. Right? So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowd around them, right? So like everybody who's there who was like, execution, like they're like ready for it. Like suddenly the guys come out and they like mob them, like, what in the world? Like that was some David Blaine level stuff. Like how did you do, right? Like so they crowd around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor that was the hair on their head singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. The last one is the one that I think is most incredible. There was no smell of fire on them. Have you been to a beach bonfire? You smell like fire for like until August, right? They go into the fire, they come out, right? And the people are like, this is mind-blowing. We've never seen anything like this, right? Like they're inspecting, right? Like the bodies are fine, like the skin is fine, the clothes are fine, the hair is fine, turbans, fine. A miracle. There's one thing that's not fine. One thing that burned in the fire. Do you remember what it was? Ropes, right? They were tied up tightly with ropes and thrown into the fire, right? They put their trust in God. They were bound. They were carried to the fire and thrown in, right? They're in the fire. Bodies, fine. Skin, fine. Clothes, fine. Hair, fine. Don't even smell like smoke. Ropes, incinerated. Gone. Here's why. Because when you put your trust in Jesus, when you put your faith in Jesus, the closer you get to him, the freer you become. Let me say that again. The closer you get to Jesus, the freer you become. And that is true of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? They decide, they draw a line in the sand. They say, our faith is with God and God alone. Throw us in the fire if you must. They get tied, they go into the fire, they encounter Jesus, right? Their bonds are broken and they come out the other side to tell about it. So here's what it says. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted him and defied the king, Nebuchadnezzar, the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any god except their own. Therefore, I decree law, right? I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut into pieces. Classic Nebuchadnezzar, just like way overdoing it, will be cut into pieces and their houses will be turned to a pile of rubble, right? Here's why. For no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. There are two things, like if you leave tonight thinking about two things, like if two things lodge themselves into your mind for you to continue to think about, it's these two things. I want to just give you some phrases to chew on as you go from here. Here's the first one. Here's the first thought. God loves. He loves to prove you right when you put your trust in him. God loves to prove you right when you put your trust in him. Right? There's a world full of people who would love nothing more than to prove you wrong for your faith. God loves to prove you right. Now, that doesn't mean that things always go the way you think they will. That doesn't mean that the story is never the furnace, right? But God loves to prove you right when you put your trust in him. I've seen it over and over and over again in my life, in my friends' lives, in the lives of people who have faith in God. He loves to prove you right when you put your trust in him. Here's the other thing that I want to say. Sometimes the opposition is the opportunity. Right? Like we think like, oh, like I could just like serve God if it was easy and there was like no friction and I never came into like conflict or anything. Like I would just be such a good Christian. It'd be amazing, right? Sometimes the opposition is the opportunity. In Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's story, right? Like King Nebuchadnezzar opposing them is their opportunity, right? Like they keep their faith. They hold on to it. They're not letting it go. They go in the fire. God shows up. They come out. And what happens? Nebuchadnezzar himself has a change of heart. He legalizes their faith. In fact, he says anyone will be punished if they say anything against his faith. The opposition is the opportunity, right? And so before we close, before we go to a time of worship, I just want to finish my story about my first night of college, right? And so I'm there. It's my first day at LMU. I'm faced with a decision. And spoiler alert, I chose to keep my faith, and I'm so grateful that I did, right? So night one, they're like, we're going to have a rager in our apartment. I'm like, great. And so I'm like, that's not me. Right, that's not me. I'm not trying to like ruin your fun or realize that's just not me. So I'm just gonna kind of like hang in the room and do me, take it easy, unpack all of that. And they're like, all right. And so like I'm in my room, night one, the door's closed. The other side of the door is like boom, 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 boom. Like, and people are like, it's like crazy out there. And I'm in my room and I'm just sitting there reading my Bible. I'm just like, this is like something out of a movie, right? And I'm sitting there, I'm reading my Bible, and I'm like, God, what am I doing here? Like, did I make a mistake? Like, should I even be here? Like, how am I gonna do this for the next couple of years? How does this all work out? I'm sitting there, right? And a few hours into the night, this soft knock comes at my door. I'm like, come in, right? And the door opens and this head pops in of this girl, just a sweet girl, blonde, kind of shy, right? And she's like, what are you doing? Do you wanna come join us? I'm like, oh no, I'm fine. She's like, what are you reading? I'm like, the Bible. Like, what a cliche, right? She's like, what, that's really interesting. Can you tell me about that? Right? Her name's Erin, right? And so we start a friendship, Erin and I. Right, so I tell her a little bit about it that night, and then over the next few years, we just start a friendship, and she just has a million questions. She's honestly just curious, right? She's not trying to prove, she's not trying to disprove, she's just open, she just wants to know more. And over those years, me and the community of my friends who were believers just kind of shared Jesus with her, right? And we graduate college, and I'll tell you, there was no like amazing moment that I got to experience with her where she's like, I believe, right? Like that didn't happen, but I left college and I was like, what an awesome opportunity just to answer some questions. And about a year and a half after I graduated, this one night, out of the blue, I get a call from Erin. I pick up the phone, I'm like, hey, Erin, I haven't heard from you forever. What's going on? And she's like crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And she's like, I'm doing so good. I just called you because I was thinking about that first night that we met, when there was that party in your apartment and you let me come into the room and tell me about the Bible. And I just want to let you know that earlier today, I put my faith in Jesus. I'm a Christian. I just want to say thank you. That was one of the sweetest moments of my life, you guys, because sometimes the opposition is the opportunity. My hope for you guys is that you would keep your faith as long as you live. All right, so we're gonna pray together, and then we're gonna go to a time of worship, and you can just respond how you need to respond. Would you pray with me? God, thank you so much for loving us, for being a God that we can put our faith into, God, that we can trust you and believe you. God, thank you for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and honestly, just making them bold. God, thank you for protecting their story, for keeping their story, and for putting it in your book so that we can hear it and learn from it. God, I pray that whenever we encounter the story for the rest of our life, that we remember what it has to say to us. So God, as we come to you in worship, we just pray that you would posture our hearts towards you in a way that you deserve. God, that you would continue to speak to us. God, that you'd meet us here. We love you. We thank you. We praise you, and we pray it in the precious name of Jesus.